a centuries-old royal rite, a hall full of tradition, silence, and secrets. No one was meant to speak, but Prince George shattered that silence. His words, not just defiance, they were a declaration of war on the elders who control the monarchy's fate. And it all began with a single forbidden glance toward Catherine. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The Grand Chamber was never designed for drama. It was designed for control. High ceilings and heavy tapestries kept echoes trapped, tradition frozen in time. This was the room where kings were watched, not questioned, where silence wasn't just expected, it was sacred. The ceremony of acknowledgement was one of the monarchy's most secretive rites. Its purpose? To affirm the chain of loyalty that would pass from crown to crown. Future monarchs were to attend as shadows present, observing, but voiceless. That morning, George, second in line to the throne, took his assigned seat quietly. Dressed in ceremonial garb, the young prince was expected to listen, absorb, and disappear when the final bell tolled. But fate had written a different script, one that would rewrite his destiny and rattle the very foundation of the royal establishment. It wasn't George's presence that drew whispers. It was his eyes, sharp, restless, focused. Every time the crown's inner circle spoke, his gaze shifted not to them, but to the back of the room, where his mother sat apart from the central royal seats. Catherine, Princess of Wales, outwardly composed but dimmed. Her light dimmed not by illness, as the public had been told, but by silence, forced silence. She wasn't supposed to be seated there, not after what had transpired in the weeks before. Yet she came. She sat. She watched. And George noticed everything. From the way the elder statesman avoided looking her way to how his own father, Prince William, barely moved his lips all ceremony long. There was a chill beneath the regal warmth. And it wasn't just the winter air that stirred through the cracks in the stone. A subtle glance passed between mother and son. It was fleeting, but electric. And then, from somewhere behind the altar, a royal aide leaned into another and whispered, "Something's not right." That's when George's fists began to clench. He didn't breathe like the others. He didn't bow his head when the archbishop invoked blessings. Instead, he remained upright. Still, not out of defiance, but out of duty. It was written in his posture. Something inside him had already made the decision. And the moment that final statement from the Council of Elders echoed through the chamber, the boy prince stood, alone, uninvited, unafraid. The room didn't gasp, it froze. The silence wasn't broken by the sound of his voice. It was broken by the fact that he dared to speak at all. But to understand what truly fueled George's rebellion, we must journey back to the weeks of quiet devastation that pushed him to the edge. Behind palace walls, a mother's silence can echo louder than any speech. Catherine's disappearance from public view wasn't just due to illness, it was exile. And George saw it all. The closed doors, the whispered meetings, the crown turning its back on its future queen. In the official press briefings, it was framed delicately: recovery, privacy, time to heal. But those closest to the palace knew something darker was unraveling behind the grandeur. Catherine was not resting. She was being restrained, isolated within Windsor's inner quarters, not with her family but surrounded by hand-picked staff, loyal not to her, but to the system. Staff who monitored every visitor, every conversation, even her meals arrived with subtle time logs. Her role wasn't to recover, it was to disappear without scandal. Her scheduled engagements quietly removed from the royal calendar. Her name increasingly omitted from internal communications regarding upcoming ceremonies. To the outside world, it looked like grace under pressure. But to George, it looked like erasure. The signs weren't lost on him. He wasn't a child anymore, not in mind, not in spirit. He saw the difference in the guards posted near his mother's quarters. New faces, different patterns, less warmth, more protocol. He remembered how, not long ago, Catherine's doors remained open into the late evenings, welcoming. Familiar. Now they shut early. The light beneath them dimmed long before dusk. George had once run down those halls, his laughter echoing through Windsor's quiet corners. Now, he walked in silence, counting each unfamiliar uniform that stood between him and the woman who once tucked him in with a kiss and a story. Rumors whispered their way through corridors. Leaked internal memos hinted at necessary adjustments to Catherine's ceremonial role. There was mention of her absence from the upcoming spring parade. Discussions on reshaping public perception. One document, slipped accidentally into a briefing folder, contained a shocking line. Future Queen status, pending further review by the advisory circle. George saw it. He wasn't meant to, but he did. And in that moment, the palace ceased to be a home, it became a battlefield. The final blow came quietly, almost cruelly. A private church service, held in honor of St. Margaret, the same sacred tradition, attended exclusively by reigning or future queens, had been scheduled. Catherine, without explanation, was denied entry. The excuse was vague. Timing, security, capacity. But everyone knew. She had never missed it before. George, dressed and ready to attend beside her, waited at the entrance. When the guards gently blocked their path, Catherine didn't resist. She simply placed her hand on George's shoulder and turned away. But her silence that day spoke more than 1,000 protests. Later that evening, in the quiet of his room, George whispered the question that had been burning inside him for weeks. Why is she not allowed to smile anymore? And while William remained silent, it was George who began asking the questions no one dared to voice. They call them the elders, the silent architects of the monarchy's destiny. Former royals, ancient advisors, church figures, and shadows of past power, and behind closed curtains, they made a pact, one that erased Catherine from the line of influence, all in the name of stability. For centuries, the monarchy has protected itself not only with tradition, but with secrecy. Hidden within the palatial hierarchy sits a circle more powerful than most realize, the Council of Elders. Not formally recognized, not listed in any constitutional document, but instrumental in shaping the present and safeguarding the future. Their influence operates through whispers, nods, and discreet directives. And when transitions approach or crises loom, they gather not in front of cameras or beneath chandeliers, but in hushed quarters where agendas are built and bloodlines measured. It was in one of these clandestine meetings that Catherine's fate was sealed. The tone was formal, but the intention brutal. An unrecorded vote. A quiet agreement. No future queen would emerge from the Middleton line, not now, not ever. The instigator? Camilla. Her influence had grown tenfold since Charles's ascension. While publicly she embraced her role with poise, privately she cemented allies, long-time courtiers loyal to her cause, clergy who viewed modernity as a threat, retired royals nostalgic for a monarchy untainted by common blood. Catherine, in their view, represented a deviation too bold, too popular, too uncontrollable. So the elders moved to neutralize her, not with scandal, but with silence. A strategy more effective than public disgrace. They called it preservation of tradition, but it was exile, in disguise. Not everyone agreed. Prince Edward, quiet but perceptive, raised concerns. He questioned the precedent, questioned the wisdom of undermining a woman who had served the crown with unwavering dignity. But within days, Edward found his name removed from 3 major royal committees. One of his private aides was dismissed without explanation. The message was clear. Dissent would not be tolerated, even among royals. The final blow came with the words George was never meant to hear. He had wandered into the corridor by accident, curious, alert, restless. Through a slightly ajar door, he heard voices. Men speaking not as servants of the nation, but as strategists of power. One sentence carved itself into his memory like stone. Better she disappear quietly than divide the throne later. In that instant, innocence fell away. George had known his mother was being pushed aside, but now he understood why. She wasn't a liability. She was a threat, not to the people but to those who feared a future they couldn't control. That night, George didn't speak a word, but his eyes didn't close. He stayed awake, staring into the silence that had swallowed his family, and deep within him, something unfamiliar stirred, not sadness, not confusion, but resolve. He was no longer just the next in line, he was the witness to a betrayal, the bearer of a secret war. The moment George heard that, something inside him changed. The child prince became a guardian, and his mother's dignity became his cause. They raised him to follow protocol, but in the quiet corners of the palace, George was learning something else: resistance. With every protocol he studied, he found its loophole. With every royal lesson, he found the truth they wanted hidden. He wasn't just preparing to inherit the crown, he was preparing to fight for it. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It was quiet, subtle, and it began not in rebellion, but in curiosity. As the walls around Catherine tightened and the whispers in the palace thickened with conspiracy, George retreated not into fear, but into knowledge. While others believed he was memorizing bloodlines and royal oaths, he was poring over hidden archives tucked away in private libraries. Documents on abdications, failed reigns, betrayals that had been sanitized from public memory. He read about Edward VIII's fall, about Margaret's silencing, even passages marked classified, that revealed power struggles between consorts and councils. Each page opened his eyes wider to the truth. The monarchy was not a sanctuary, it was a battlefield dressed in gold. And in the silence of twilight hours, a surprising ally emerged: Princess Anne. Stern in public, but fiercely loyal behind closed doors, she saw the flicker in George's eyes that reminded her of someone long gone. She didn't say much, but when she spoke, her words landed like stone. Don't confuse tradition with justice, George. They rarely walk hand in hand. With her quiet guidance, he learned to observe not just what was said, but what was withheld. Who moved in and out of rooms? Who was absent from key events? Who was protected? Who was sacrificed? He began to see the invisible lines of allegiance that ran through the palace like fault lines beneath marble floors. George began keeping a journal, not of royal duties or school lessons, but of truths, observations, suspicions, patterns. He named it the Silent Inheritance. In it, he mapped the slow disappearance of his mother from the royal ecosystem. He noted who stopped greeting her in corridors, who omitted her from ceremonial plans. He recorded the look on William's face when her name was mentioned. He wasn't just learning to inherit power, he was documenting how it was stolen. And Catherine, sensing the shift in her son's soul, began to nurture it. She left him notes, disguised as book annotations, margins underlined in old biographies, poems circled in dusty volumes. One day, inside a hollowed history book, he found a single handwritten page. The truth must survive, even if we don't. One night, unable to hold it in, George confronted her. His voice didn't tremble, it burned. "Mum, do they want to take you away from me?" Catherine didn't lie. But she didn't confirm it either. She simply held his face, her eyes filled with sorrow and steel, and whispered, "You already know." That moment changed everything. The boy who once recited royal vows with innocence now studied their cracks with purpose. But resistance needs opportunity, and when the ancient ceremony of acknowledgement came, George saw his moment. The world watched a celebration. But inside those marble halls, war was about to erupt. George, silent and unreadable, walked into that chamber knowing he was about to commit royal treason. His heart pounded. Every eye on him, every elder expecting obedience. But they didn't expect the heir to rise. The ceremony of acknowledgement was designed to be unshakable. It symbolized unity between generations, between titles, between duty and blood. A rigid, time-worn ritual where no words were spoken without permission, where every breath was choreographed. Attendance alone was a privilege. Speaking was a privilege reserved for the crown. Not even heirs were allowed a voice unless summoned. The chamber had witnessed centuries of quiet succession, but today, silence would be shattered. George sat 3 seats from King Charles, his posture perfect, expression unreadable, Beside him, the Archbishop Welby offered a ceremonial nod standard, nothing more. On the other side of the room, Camilla's eyes swept across the chamber, landing on Catherine, who sat near the rear, positioned like a tolerated guest, not the mother of the heir. The message was deliberate. She wasn't welcome at the front. As the ceremonial invocations echoed through the grand hall, George remained still. Yet beneath his composed exterior, a storm churned. He was no longer the quiet prince who once bowed to rules without question. He was the witness to betrayal, the child of a discarded queen, and the keeper of unspoken truths. Every word from the elders, every call to protect the sanctity of tradition sounded hollow, because he knew what they had done, what they had taken from her, what they would take next if no one intervened. And then it happened. A pause between ceremonial statements, a shift in the rhythm. The crown's silence, heavy and unquestioned, pressed down on every soul in the room. No one was meant to move, but George did. Slowly, deliberately, he rose from his seat. His shoes echoed against the ancient floor. A gasp escaped from somewhere near the aisle. Camilla stiffened. Catherine's eyes widened. And William, caught between horror and awe, did nothing. He didn't move. He didn't stop him. He simply stared, frozen in a storm of legacy and blood. For a moment, the room seemed suspended in time. The elders blinked in disbelief. Advisors looked to one another, unsure whether to intervene or remain still. The Archbishop's lips parted, but no words came. Because George had already stepped outside the script. There was no turning back, no forgiveness for what he was about to do. But he didn't care. Because this wasn't about tradition. It was about justice. And he wouldn't let history repeat its crimes against his mother. And then George spoke. Not as a child, not as a prince, but as the future king and the son of the woman they tried to erase. No script, no approval, just truth. What George said in that room will be remembered for generations. He didn't plead, he didn't bow. He defended his mother with the conviction of a future monarch, and in doing so, shattered the illusion of unity within the royal bloodline. His voice rang out, not with fury, but with unwavering calm, each word carefully chosen, each phrase cutting through centuries of pageantry like a blade. "You may silence my mother," he began, "but you cannot silence her legacy." Gasps echoed across the chamber. Some clutched pearls, others their pride. But George pressed on, eyes locked on the circle of elders that had orchestrated his mother's quiet removal from the royal centre. "You wear history like armour," he said, his voice rising, "but you fear change. You fear women who speak with grace and power. You fear the people loving someone who wasn't born into this palace, but earned their place within it." He wasn't reading from parchment. He wasn't quoting protocol. He was dismantling a kingdom's silence, word by word. The accusations hit their mark. Without hesitation, George named the betrayal. Not abstract, not vague, direct. He called out the forces loyal to Queen Camilla, those who had manipulated the rules of tradition to sideline Catherine under the guise of protection. Tradition was not built to keep the righteous out, he declared. It was built to keep the powerful few in. Every syllable was a challenge, a dare. A rejection of the suffocating structure they were trying to preserve. Some elders tried to interject, others whispered among themselves, but none stood to stop him. Because deep down, even they knew he was right. And then came the part that shifted the ground beneath them. George invoked precedent. "You hold Queen Victoria up as a symbol of strength," he said. "Yet you forget she was once told she couldn't lead without a man beside her. And she proved them all wrong. You speak of duty, but you forget Diana cast aside for being too loved by the public, too human for the crown. My mother walks in the shadow of those two women, and she will not be forgotten." His words weren't just historical references, they were indictments of the system itself. Not just of what it had done, but what it continued to do under the cloak of ceremony and silence. Then came the vision, a bold, revolutionary proposal that no one in that room had anticipated. "There must be a new order," George proclaimed, "a new order of loyalty. one that places character above lineage, service above blood, truth above tradition. For a boy not yet crowned, it was the speech of a sovereign. Prince Edward lowered his head, tears glistening in his eyes. Anne closed hers, and for a moment, the entire monarchy held its breath. But it wouldn't be allowed to last. But defiance comes with consequences, and within hours, the retaliation began. The palace may seem calm, but retaliation inside the royal machine is swift and merciless. Hours after George's speech, phones buzzed, statements were drafted, and alliances shattered. The elders were not about to lose power to a teenage prince, even if it meant rewriting the line of succession. The aftermath was not dramatic in the way revolutions are depicted. It was cold, precise, and executed with the efficiency of an institution well versed in extinguishing dissent. The first counterstrike came through public relations. A carefully worded palace memo was quietly circulated to trusted media outlets, expressing concern for Prince George's emotional well-being and subtly implying that his outburst may have stemmed from stress and youthful idealism. The message was clear: discredit the messenger, soften the rebellion into a phase. Behind the scenes, Camilla's advisors moved with surgical speed, feeding whispers of emotional pressure and teenage misinterpretation to royal correspondents, building a narrative that the public outcry was overblown. What George had said in truth, they were already recasting as a lapse in judgment. And it didn't stop there. Within 24 hours, two key events that George was scheduled to attend, a Commonwealth Youth Summit and an Armed Forces Day commemoration, were quietly updated. His name was removed from the official program. When questioned, aides cited schedule adjustments. But those closest to the core knew this was retaliation dressed in diplomacy. Meanwhile, Catherine had prepared a short statement in support of her son. It was not political. It was not confrontational. Just a mother's pride. Yet it never saw daylight. Palace aides refused to release it. The communications director, acting on instruction, declared it inappropriate at this time. Catherine's voice was silenced again, not by accident, but by design. William stood at the center of it all, torn. He had watched his son do what he had never dared: stand up to the power behind the crown. But now, he was being asked to choose. The elders summoned him for a private briefing. Their tone wasn't angry, it was measured, strategic. They spoke of duty, of damage control, of preparing George for the realities of rule. And then, one line chilled him: we may need to reconsider his readiness to serve. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning, a veiled threat, one that carried the implication that even heirs could be replaced if they became inconvenient. William returned home that night, changed. He didn't speak at dinner. He didn't touch his wine. He watched George from across the table, calm, confident, quietly resolute. And somewhere between pride and fear, he realized the truth. His son had just drawn a line in the sand that no royal had dared draw since Diana. And the institution would not back down without a fight. But one figure refused to be erased: Catherine herself. And what she did next stunned the world. After months in the shadows, Catherine stepped forward, not in fury, but with fierce elegance. In a moment that rivaled Diana's famous interviews, she didn't just defend George, she reclaimed her place, her voice, and her crown of dignity. It wasn't announced, it wasn't rehearsed, it simply happened. On a grey morning outside a children's hospital in Oxfordshire, the car pulled up, and out stepped Catherine, poised, composed, and accompanied by the very son who had set the monarchy ablaze with truth. The cameras weren't prepared, but the world was watching. For the first time in months, the woman they tried to bury under silence walked back into the light. No fanfare, no press conference, just presence. And that, more than any headline, sent a wave through the monarchy and across the nation. She greeted the children with warmth, held the hands of parents, and stood before the press with the quiet power of someone who had suffered, survived, and returned stronger. When asked about George's speech, her response was short but unforgettable. "My son's courage," she said, "reminds me why we serve." Just 10 words, But those 10 words unraveled months of palace spin and institutional gaslighting. She didn't need to accuse. She didn't need to explain. Because her standing there, beside her son, said it all. The public erupted. Hashtags flooded social media. Number Queen Catherine. Number Stand with George. Number the rightful future. Commentators who had once speculated about her absence now offered public apologies. Even former critics called it one of the most powerful non-political statements made by a royal in the last decade. It wasn't just a media moment. It was a cultural reckoning. Behind palace walls, the impact was immediate. Leaked memos confirmed what many suspected King Charles had quietly instructed his aides to stand down. No more interference. No more delays. The wave of public support had shifted the calculus. Continuing to suppress Catherine would no longer be seen as protecting the institution, it would be seen as undermining its soul. And for once, the monarch chose retreat over resistance. Advisors scrambled to revise strategy. Internal memos were pulled. Events were rescheduled. A public statement praising family unity was drafted and left unsigned. That same afternoon, George was seen gripping his mother's hand outside the hospital, not as a child clinging to a parent, but as an equal standing beside his shield. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The boy who stood before the elders had now become the prince who walked with purpose beside the woman they tried to erase. But the moment that cracked hearts wide open came later that day. As the family regrouped for an unofficial appearance, Princess Charlotte, tearful, beaming, and unable to hold back, rushed through the crowd and threw her arms around her mother. Catherine knelt, embraced her daughter, and smiled with the weight of a woman who had fought for her place and found it waiting in the eyes of her children. And just when the nation began to hope for healing, a final twist shook the palace to its foundation. He'd remained quiet too long. Now, Prince William had a choice: loyalty to tradition or loyalty to his blood. Behind locked doors, he confronted his father. The crown wasn't the only thing at stake. The future of the monarchy now depended on one ultimatum and one whispered sentence that would define a generation. For weeks, William had walked the palace corridors like a man caught between two storms, one of duty, the other of love. As the institution retaliated against George's defiance and Catherine's resurgence reignited the people's devotion, William found himself increasingly isolated. The advisors no longer confided in him. His father's tone had grown clipped, guarded. Even his own schedule had become suspiciously light, as if the machine was subtly repositioning him without saying a word. He had remained composed in public, but inside, a decision was building, one that would tear through centuries of silence. That decision reached its boiling point in a private study, far from the cameras, behind the thick oak doors of Sandringham. There were no aides, no secretaries, just a father and a son, a king and an heir. William came armed not with anger, but with facts, evidence. Internal memos that showed deliberate manipulation of ceremonial roles to sideline Catherine. Notes from briefings where George's presence was questioned. Records of planned media narratives coordinated through Camilla's allies. For the first time, William laid it all bare before the man who once taught him the sacredness of silence. But this time, silence would no longer be sacred. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply offered a choice. The Council of Elders, those unseen hands that had twisted loyalty into control, must be dissolved, their powers revoked, their influence erased. Or, William said, eyes steady, I withdraw from succession. I walk away. With Catherine. With George. With the future you're trying to contain. Charles didn't speak. He didn't flinch. The words floated in the air like a curse that couldn't be taken back. But William wasn't done. He stepped closer. Closer than protocol allowed, and he whispered the sentence that would haunt the throne. If you exile my son for loyalty, then you've lost your throne already. There was no argument, no fury, just a long pause. Then Charles blinked, and a single tear escaped, down the cheek of a man who had once given everything for duty, and was now watching it unravel, not from enemies, but from within. William turned and walked out, leaving the silence to echo behind him. Outside, the world still spun, the palace still stood. But nothing inside was the same. And so, as the monarchy trembles under the weight of its own legacy, the question remains: who will wear the crown, and who will rewrite what it means to deserve it? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.